Welcome back. Thanks very much for staying with us. You're watching WION World is One with me, Raisha Sehgal. And this is Speed News. We're getting the latest from all across the globe. I'm also being joined by Miss Rajni, our interpreter. Let's get you started. Israeli Defense Forces say that they have tightened their grip around southern Gaza's main city of Khan Yunis. IDF calls it the most intense combat in 5 weeks of ground operations against Hamas. Israel said its troops backed by warplanes have reached the heart of Khan Yunis and are surrounding the besieged city. The commander of Israeli military's southern command also says that the fighting is underway in Jabalia refugee camp and in Shuja city. Well, after days of ordering residents to flee the area, the Israeli forces dropped new leaflets with instructions to stay inside shelters and hospitals during the assault. According to reports and Israeli women's rights groups, sexual assault was a part of an atrocities-filled rampage by Hamas and other Gaza militants against October 7th hostages. Israeli Defense Forces say that they saw footages of women in several locations and that their condition left the armed forces in no doubt that they had been raped. The Israeli police say that they have so far gathered more than 1,500 testimonies from witnesses and medics after campaigners in Israel alleged that gender-based violence during the Hamas's attack. Well, US President Joe Biden has called for global condemnation of what he terms as horrific sexual violence by Hamas. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken has said that the State Department will impose visa bans against individuals involved in undermining peace in the West Bank. The restriction is said to target those who have committed acts of violence or taken other actions that restrict civilians' access to essential services and basic necessities. The White House says that more designations will be made in the coming days. Any Israeli with an existing US visa who targeted any West Bank Palestinian settlement would be notified that the visa was revoked. US President Joe Biden and Secretary Blinken will press Israeli officials to take stronger actions against West Bank settlers. The Galaxy Leader commercial ship seized by the Houthi rebels last month has been turned into a tourist attraction for Yemenis. Houthis are welcoming visitors to board the ship that they reach by small fishing boats. Visitors are allowed only to tour the ship's deck and take selfies. Houthi moral songs are also played on loudspeakers mounted on the vessel's towers. The crew of the Galaxy Leader have been allowed modest contact with the families while various countries push for their release. The vessel's crew is made up of nationals from Bulgaria, Ukraine, the Philippines, Mexico and Romania. The US has blamed the Houthis for a series of attacks on West Asian waters since the Israel-Hamas war broke out on October 7th. The US Congress took on the subject of anti-Semitism in college campuses by questioning the presidents of Harvard, MIT and the University of Pennsylvania during a House hearing on Tuesday. Pro-Palestinian demonstrations and Jewish students' reports of harassment at school were at the center of the hearing held by the Committees on Education and the Workforce. On campuses around the US, students on both the sides say that they have been subjected to taunts and rhetoric that oppose their very existence. They see it in campus rallies, on anonymous message boards frequented by college students, and also on graffiti scrawled on dorms and buildings.
Los dos chiquititos ahí, acá.
6 Ukrainian children will be returned to Kiev from Russia under a deal brokered by Qatar. Negotiations on the returns had been underway since April this year. The Qatari Emir agreed to a Ukrainian request to mediate with Russia on the return of children to their immediate families during a visit to Ukraine in July. Kiev says that about 20,000 children have been taken from Ukraine to Russia or Russian-held territory without the consent of their family or the guardians. Ukraine calls this a war crime that meets the UN treaty's definition of a genocide. Meanwhile, Moscow denies the accusation and says it has protected vulnerable children from the war zone. US Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer has said that he would try to break an impasse over additional congressional funding for Ukraine and Israel. Schumer said that he would offer Republicans the chance to add an amendment on border policy to the legislation. The Republicans and Democrats have been debating for weeks over Biden's request to approve $106 billion for Ukraine and Israel. Well, this also includes funds for security at the US border with Mexico. US Vice President Kamala Harris has set the record for breaking the most ties in the Senate by a vice president. This came after she cast a vote to confirm Lauren Ali Khan to become the first South Asian woman judge on the Federal District Court in Washington, D.C. Harris cast a tie-breaking vote that allowed the Democratic-led Senate to vote 51-50. A confirmation came after Harris earlier in the day broke a tie on a procedural vote to allow Ali Khan's nomination to proceed to a final vote. Harris has now cast 33 tie-breaking votes in the Senate, and this is more than 31 votes cast by John Calhoun. That is when he was the vice president from 1825 to 1832. Donald Trump has again mocked questions about authoritarianism. Trump said that if elected as the president again, he will become a dictator only on day one and then close the border and get to drilling. Trump, who is seeking a second White House run in a likely election rematch with Democrat President Joe Biden, has frequently promised retribution against political opponents. Biden has described Trump as a grave threat to democracy and a huge problem in 2024 elections. Former UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson will make a much-anticipated appearance before an inquiry panel today into the handling of COVID-19 pandemic. The inquiry has already heard damaging testimony about Johnson's handling of the crisis, and this includes claims of government incompetence, backstabbing and misogyny, and his reluctance for a lockdown. Well, Johnson will face 2 days of questioning in what is said to be the most charged session of the official probe so far. Families of some of those who died from COVID-19 plan to confront Johnson outside the inquiry building, while some leaders fear that the probe will further dent support for the governing Conservatives. Amnesty International has said that El Salvador has seen an alarming relapse of human rights abuse during President Nayib Bukele's government. The organization says that this trend has intensified under a sweeping anti-gang crackdown. Well, the president had enjoyed widespread popularity since taking office in 2019, due in part to a state of emergency declared last year. In a 69-page report, Amnesty International detailed an increasingly punitive and repressive approach to public security during Bukele's rule. It also highlights threats to due process, systematic use of torture, and the mistreatment of detainees and prisoners. Gurpantwan Singh Panno, the US-based Khalistani terrorist, has released another video and said that he would attack the Indian Parliament on or before December 13th. December 13th will be the 22nd anniversary of the terror attack on Parliament in 2001. Well, Pannu is one of the founders of US-based separatist group Seeks for Justice. Pannu released a video that featured a poster with his photo alongside Afzal Guru, the terrorist who attacked the Indian parliament and was hanged in 2013. In the clip, Pannu threatened action that he said will shake the very foundations of parliament. The Indian security agencies have beefed up security in and around the national capital of New Delhi. Peru's constitutional court has ordered the release of former President Alberto Fujimori. He's serving a 25-year-long imprisonment for human rights abuses and corruption. The former president, who was in power through the 1990s, received a presidential pardon in 2017. However, pressure from the Inter-American Court of Human Rights repeatedly stalled his attempts to regain freedom. The court has now ruled Fujimori's immediate release from the detention center where he is being held. Supporters of Fujimori celebrated the court order, marking the latest chapter in a dizzying legal saga for the controversial former leader. Venezuelan president has said that he would authorize oil exploration in an area around the Essequibo River. Even though the territory is a subject of dispute with Guyana, Maduro's comments come after his government held a referendum over the weekend where the voters rejected ICJ's jurisdiction and backed a new state in the territory. Though Maduro has repeatedly said that the referendum is binding, the International Court last week barred Venezuela from taking any action that changes the status quo in the oil-rich region. The death toll from Indonesia's Merapi volcano eruption jumped to 22 as rescuers found more climbers who had perished near the crater. Around 200 rescuers will resume search operation today for one more missing climber. The head of the search and rescue team said that 16 casualties had been handed to disaster victim identification team at the hospitals there. Well, Merapi is one of the most active volcanoes on Sumatra Island and last erupted in January and February. Well, this year, Sunday's eruption of Mount Merapi was the deadliest since 1979, when an eruption killed 60 people.
Habis evakuasi langsung istirahat.
At least 17 people have been reported dead in Tamil Nadu's capital city Chennai so far. This as heavy rains triggered by the cyclone Michong continued to pound the city, leaving several parts flooded. The Indian Weather Department has said that the deadly cyclone has now weakened into a deep depression over the central coastal region of Andhra Pradesh. The cyclone is expected to weaken further into a depression in the next few hours. The cyclone made landfall in Andhra Pradesh near the Baptala coast. The landfall phenomenon lasted for around 3 hours, leaving a trail of inundation. This along with overflowing roads and swollen rivers that destroyed areas. Residents in Tanzania's Manara region are reeling from the aftermath of heavy rains that swept through the area. The floods have left a trail of destruction and claimed at least 63 lives. The torrential rain caused flash flooding with tumbling down the mountain and engulfing homes and villages. The flooding has been exacerbated by the drought which has hit the region in 40 years. The flood has left the soil dry, making it unable to absorb water as well. A mysterious illness has stricken dogs in at least 14 states in the US. The American Veterinary Medical Association is asking vets to report cases while labs race to isolate the pathogen. The researchers are trying to determine if the disease is viral or bacterial and if it could be a variant of the disease found amongst the dogs. So far, there is very little indication as per how the disease can spread to humans. However, vets are warning the dog owners to take extra care to prevent the disease spreading during the holiday season. The British Museum has lent Athens an ancient Greek vase. This is the first time it has left the museum in over 250 years, as well as other 7 artifacts for an exhibition. This comes a week after a diplomatic row between Britain and Greece over antiquities. Nvidia CEO Jensen Huang said that the company was working closely with the US government to ensure new chips for the Chinese market, and they are compliant with export curbs. The California-based artificial intelligence chip designer has commanded more than 90% share of China's $7 billion AI chip market, but experts have said that the new US curbs on chip exports are likely to create opportunities for Chinese rivals to make inroads. China is an important market for Nvidia that is focusing on the AI boom. The shares of Nvidia have outperformed all other mega cap stocks on Wall Street. But any disruption in the Chinese markets could lead to a revaluation of the stock. In more AI-related news, Elon Musk's artificial intelligence startup XAI has filed with the US securities regulator to raise up to $1 billion in an equity offering. The company has raised $134.7 million in equity financing from a total offering amount of $1 billion. Fundraising for AI remains a bright spot for startups this year, following OpenAI's launch of popular chatbot ChatGPT last year and raising of $10 billion from its strategic backer Microsoft. Regulators, however, are concerned about the potential use of the technology to spread misinformation. But Musk has been vocal about his plans to build a safer AI model. Johnson & Johnson has said that the company had recently reached settlements with several law firms over their clients' claims that the J&J goods caused cancer, while it faces more than 50,000 lawsuits over talc, which is mostly used by women with ovarian cancer. The company has said that its products are safe and do not contain asbestos.